Watch KSTV weeknights at 7:30 and 11 Eastern, and anytime with Insight on Demand on Channel 103.
And we are now happy to be joined via Skype by Lexington from the man who some say is the inspiration for the most interesting man in the world, Dave Baker. Dave, how are you?
I don't often, but when I do. How you doing?
Now, somebody who maybe hasn't been that interesting the last couple of years is Joker Phillips. Made some news this week for an interview we did with Kyle Tucker of the Courier-Journal. He was asked, do you worry about your job security? Joker quoted two of your favorites, I know 50 Cent and Oprah, said he doesn't worry, but from where you're looking, should Joker worry coming into this season?
Well, I think what you've got to do, I think a couple of things. I think in general, in college athletics, that the window has become much shorter for coaches. I think in the SEC in particular, that has become the case. And if you drill down even more, I think because of the way that Mitch Barnhart correctly handled the Billy Gillispie situation, I think this puts an awful lot of emphasis on this year. And again, for people who say, and you've heard this, and people have been saying it for a long time, football supporters in Kentucky saying, I wish they would start treating football like they do basketball. If that's the case, then this is a critical year for Joe.
Do you think this has been, the best year for UK athletics overall in a long time, from basketball to baseball to, all the sports? Do you think that almost puts more pressure on Joker because Mitch Barnhart has found success with his coaches in other programs? Do you think that actually puts more pressure on Joker?
Well, I mean, everything's relative. And from the standpoint that everybody else has done so well, I think that puts more of a spotlight on you. I think when you, and sometimes it's comparing apples and oranges, but in a year in which Gary Henderson readily acknowledged before the season, the UK baseball coach, that he was on the proverbial hot seat, he was able to produce in a big time way. And so from that standpoint, I think the thing that makes it more critical than anything else for Joker is the fact that it is so difficult in the SEC in football, number one. It's gotten more difficult, number two, because of the expansion of the league. Three, you've got James Franklin, the coach at Vanderbilt, who is in a very similar situation to Joker, who had been an assistant coach, who's come in there and just set that place on fire. Not only have they done things on the field, but I think in recruiting, this was 3 weeks ago, I want to say that Vandy in one of the services was ranked like 16th or 17th, and Kentucky was in the 70s. Yeah. But I think the final thing, Teach, that I think you got to look at is if you're a Kentucky football fan, what areas of the program are better, or what areas of the program have remained the same since Rich Brooks left? And I think more so than wins and losses, that's a fair gauge of where Joker is and what's going on with the program. Have you maintained, or have you gotten better?
Now, if he is able to get better from than last season, it's going to have a lot to do with the quarterback play. There's a saying that when you have a lot of quarterbacks, that means you don't have one that's very good. But Morgan Newton was a guy that came in with a lot of hype out of high school, had some good moments as a freshman, didn't really take the starting job like they expected last year. Maxwell Smith kind of did the same thing Morgan Newton did, came in as a freshman, showed some bright spots, and now Patrick Tolles is this All-American that people wonder about. Who do you think is going to end up with this job? I mean, I get the feeling that it's Maxwell Smith's at the moment to lose, but do you think Morgan Newton can come back and claim that job, and do you expect him to?
Here's the thing for me, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, and I've talked to some members of the UK staff about this. It's very difficult for me or you or anybody in the media. I mean, really all we can do is guess. I mean, because, if let's say you're on vacation from Michigan and you happen to come through Lexington and you want to watch a Kentucky basketball practice, if you catch Cal on the way down to the practice floor, you're liable to get in. But we don't get to see football practice. The only thing we have to gauge on what's happening on a day-to-day basis is what happens on the field. I like all those guys a lot. Morgan Newton has been very inconsistent at best. It was a combination of injury and Newton's inconsistency that gave Maxwell his opportunity. And as you know, I was very intimately involved and very close, and still am, with Tim Couch, and went through what he went through as a freshman. It is incredibly difficult. And I understand what the coaches are trying to do. You want to protect guys, you want to do all that stuff. I mean, there are an awful lot of areas where this team has to play well. Quarterback is obviously maybe the most public spot on the team, but I think there are a lot of areas they've got to show improvement in.
In that improvement, that's why, Mitch Barnhart, he did an interview with us, said that he wants to see improvement in order to feel comfortable about keeping Joker. And he didn't say this is an X number of wins, I don't expect to see this. He says he can just tell when the football team's better that they're improved. When you're looking at the football team, you talk about those areas of improvement. Or, quarterback, obviously, defense you want to see better under Rick Minter. Do you get the expectation, I guess? Do you think in year 2 under Rick Minter, these guys in his system, Steve Brown out of the picture, not kind of lingering around, do you expect the defense to improve?
Boy, Tej, I'm going to say something here. The whole thing with Steve Brown lingering around, I don't want to start getting preachy here, but people, no matter what line of work you're in, you ought to go ahead and you ought to see how Steve Brown handled a tough situation, and you ought to use it as a template for your own professional and personal life. Because you can go ahead and you can drill down the numbers. Maybe you'll do this on one show one night. But were the numbers substantially different under Rick Minter last year than they had been the year before? And I would submit to you that they're not.
Yeah.
But Steve Brown handled it like a professional. And once the season was over, I think it took about a cup of coffee for the Tennessee Titans, who are traditionally one of the best defensive teams in the NFL, to go ahead and hire Steve Brown. So I kind of think that whole deal is a red herring. You have got to have guys that can play, and you've got to be able to coach them up. I'm going to give you an example, and it speaks to what you said about Mitch Barnhart. John Calipari doesn't get nearly enough credit for developing people. Everybody tends to look at the fact that he recruits these guys and brings in the very best guys and rolls the ball out. But I don't think there's any question that individually and collectively, that this great group of athletes last year that made up the core that won the national championship, that they played better individually and collectively as a team at the end of the year than they were at the beginning of the year. And I think, as somebody who's making an objective decision on whether it's the football program or anything else, or whether it's your program at your high school or something that's going on at your office, when you've improved, when you've stayed the same, and when you've gone backwards. So I don't think this is going to be a coin flip decision. I think it's going to be readily apparent by what is happening or what is not happening on the field.
Just to jump back to the Steve Brown thing for a second, that situation, Joker's gotten rid of a lot of guys that were here under Rich Brooks for a variety of reasons. Some say he wants to bring in recruiters. Do you think that that's a factor when you're evaluating him? Obviously, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like you don't agree with the way he handled the Steve Brown situation. Do you think the way he's handled these recruiting changes is a factor with some of the frustrations or pressure on him?
Listen, Joker as the head coach has every right to handle things the way he thinks best. I think the Steve Brown, I think the actual transition and everything was handled very well. Joker has the absolute right and authority to make a change. Do I agree with the move? No. I'll tell you straight up, Steve Brown's a friend of mine, though. And so from that standpoint, was there something going on with the scheme? Did you make a change that made you substantially better? And again, as a guy that can't see practice, and I don't mean to harp on that, but the only thing you have to judge it on is what happens in between the lines on Saturday afternoon. And I would submit to you that there wasn't a marked difference between the way the defense played. That being said, Mitch Barnhart and every other athletics director in college athletics, but especially in the SEC, is judge. The most important thing they do is hire people. It's easy to fire people, okay? But it's who you hire. Mitch realized he had made a mistake with Billy Gillispie. He corrected it, hit a home run, obviously, with John Calipari. Jeremy Foley at Florida realized he had made a mistake with Ron Zook, rectified it, hired Urban Meyer. Everybody in college athletics that hires and fires people has got a story like that. And I think, and I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the only guy on staff now that Rich hired would be Chuck Smith, I think. And I think, again, unless I'm wrong, and if I am, I'll say so, I think Chuck Smith was the only guy who didn't get his contract rolled over last year. So, I mean, all these guys that are in there now are Joker's guys. And so rather than rather than being held accountable for anything. It's his guys, it's his philosophy, it's his system. And listen, I think he's got the toughest job in all of college football, to try to climb a mountain in the SEC, a league that's won 6 straight national championships. So, I don't want to minimize what he's got in front of him. It's just a very difficult task.
Should be interesting, no doubt. Dave Baker, thank you very much for joining us. Look forward to talking to you down the line.
Tej, always a pleasure, my friend.